All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Reading Room Ruffians. This is our podcast for all things library, and that means we review books, talk of upcoming programs, we tell you library stories, have guest speakers, and generally speak about things that happen in our library. We are a group of librarians from Jackson County, West Virginia, except for Zach, and today we are going to discuss Zach's nonfiction pick. It's a really long title, but we're just going to go with Where Is Everybody by Stephen Webb. Before we do that, though, I think we are going to do a really quick mini-con recap, which happened for us last weekend, but for you guys, it'll be like, what, a month?
Probably.
Yeah, a month past. So let's get started with that.
Okay, so mini-con, I feel this year was a pretty good success. We had around 250 people. We had some new things happen this year where we gave out lanyards and people could go around collecting pins, and they could do that by winning tokens at each world with doing games or crafts. And I think that people seem to really enjoy the entire thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, the biggest complaint was that we need more space, which isn't really feasible since we're a library and we're utilizing the entire library. So, and what was the other? Oh, more games. That was the other complaint. So we're going to try to do more games next year. We've already had our first mini-con meeting of the year. Yeah. We have a lot of things planned for next year. So as a little sneak peek for you all, it's Epic Adventures. And we are going to have, as of right now, these worlds could change, but as of right now, we are doing Star Wars, Percy Jackson, and The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings combo.
Yeah, we're pretty excited.
Yeah. Anybody want to say anything else about mini-con?
I will say, on the basis of more space, if anyone wants to give us a new building, we will happily take it.
Yes.
And with more games, we need more volunteers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're in the area and you want to help out, we would love that. We will even give you some incentive to help out. We'll feed you. We're thinking about giving you a shirt.
At least so far, yeah.
And all the great memories.
Yes.
And being one of the team.
Yeah, you'll be like part of the library family.
No, really, we do love our volunteers, though.
Yes.
That's something we try really hard to take care of, yeah.
I think we're going to touch on summer reading real fast, too,
yeah,
because that's coming up for us. Summer reading this year is all together now. I have finally planned out things for my teens, so that's good. Our Ravenswood branch is doing kind of a hippie vibe with their summer reading. Mm-hmm. So, peace, love, and books. And then here, we're all kind of doing something a little different, but we're all sticking with the community, unity, all-togetherness kind of vibe.
Yeah, I think with my kids this year, I'm going to try and do some community outreach, thinking of getting in touch with a few people around the county, wanting to do maybe something to send to troops, wanting to do maybe like a pen pal program with either the senior center or elder care, something like that I think might be nice. And I think so far maybe I'm thinking something with the animal shelter as well. I will most likely have more, way more than that, but those so far are my basic ideas.
That's good. For my teens, we're doing less community-based and more team-building type things because I have a small group of teens, and this is their first year being with this group, so I don't want to overwhelm them with things. So we're going to do, where they're on teams for a trivia. We're doing a Chopped challenge, and that's like a cooking show if you don't know what that is. We're going to do a big mural where they all paint something and then we put it together. And then we have a TikTok now. The library has a TikTok now. And I'm going to have my teens work together to create TikToks for our library TikTok. And they can either do TikTok dances, skits about the library, or they can make infomercials for their favorite books, which I think is going to be hilarious.
Yeah, I think so too.
So if you are a teen in the area, come sign up.
Sign-ups are?
May 15th is when they start.
Through the June
2nd, I think, is what we're doing. Yeah, so definitely come sign up. We will be starting the first week of June. I think my toddlers are June.
The first full week, yeah.
Yeah,
the 5th,
June 5th are my toddlers, and teens are June 7th, I believe.
Sounds like fun.
All right. Well.
Yeah, it's nice to actually have something planned out.
I know. I was a little worried about not having anything planned, so I'm glad I was able to get in there and do something. Mini-con took over my life for a while, so.
Yeah, it did for all of us, I think. All right, Zach, we will let you take off on your book.
All right, sounds good. So, just a little background. I took a class on this book, actually back when I was in college, because I was getting an astronomy minor. which was pretty fun. And we decided to go over this book as a full-on class. So I've read it, I think, twice or maybe 3 times now. I think it's excellent. Basically, this book is just about something called the Fermi Paradox. Okay, so just a little bit of background here. First of all, who is Fermi? That's what the book sort of starts out with. He was this Italian-American physicist. He was probably one of the best ones of all time. Definitely one of the best ones of the last century. And he did bunches of experimental and theoretical stuff. He won the Nobel Prize, but he's also really known for coming up with these things called Fermi questions. An example of a Fermi question would be something like, how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? Right? This seems like a nonsense thing, but what you do is you go through your knowledge of the world and sort of make approximations based on what you think it seem like reasonable numbers. Like, for example, you say, I don't know, there's 3 million people in Chicago. There's some just estimate there about how many of those are families, because you figure a family owns a piano. How many of those families have a piano, and then how many times they have to be tuned, and then you should do some math, and you get some number based on how many piano tuners you think are going to be there, based on all the other numbers that you work up to. And one of these things, or at least one of these sorts of questions is, it seems obvious, based on how many stars there are in the galaxy, that there should be other aliens, assuming that, it's easy to have life form on a planet. So the question is, where is everybody? Where are all the aliens that we should be seeing? And there's a good way of estimating how many we should be seeing, just in general, based on this thing called the Drake equation. Okay? And the Drake equation is this fairly long equation where you've got, I think it's like 7 parameters or something like that. And you multiply them all together and you try to figure out how many communicating civilizations are in the galaxy right now. And I'll just rattle off the different parameters that go into it. You have n, which is the number of communicating galaxies. Then you've got stuff like the average star rate, the amount of those stars that have planets, the average number of planets that can potentially support life, the fraction of those that could support life that eventually develop it at some point, the fraction of those planets that actually go on to develop intelligent life, the fraction of those civilizations that develop a technology that release detectable signs in space, and then the length of time for which the civilizations are releasing detectable signs. And back when this was first come up, early estimations were all around about 10 to the 6th, which is about 1 million, right? It's 1 million different civilizations. So that's where this question comes from. If there's 1 million civilizations that should be communicating right now in the galaxy, why haven't we heard from any of them, right? And this book goes into a bunch of different solutions about that. So before we move on, I know at least a couple of us have come up with our own numbers. Some of them are some of these numbers that we come up with for the different little pieces of the equation are based on like real life stuff, but other ones you just sort of have to guess. So I've got the rough best current estimations for things right here, but I wanted to know what everybody else thought. What sort of numbers are we thinking for this equation? I think Mallory and Carla, I think both of you had something, right?
Let me say, before they say this, you asked us all to do this, right? And I have started listening to this book, and the way you asked this question confused the heck out of me. I did not know what you were wanting, and still, I don't truly understand what you're wanting.
Honestly, same. I just made something up. I don't know where it goes.
Oh my. Oh my. I sent them the Wikipedia page and everything, guys.
I know, but it just didn't make sense to me. You need to explain it like I'm 5, and
Same.
you were not, and Wikipedia wasn't. So, I'm smart, and this just didn't make sense to me.
I tried. I really, really tried.
Okay.
And I have several different numbers depending on what numbers I plugged into the little slots.
That's to be expected.
So it's either like 108 or 108 million, depending on how I did the math.
See, now, if you have the same numbers, but you did the math differently, that's a different story.
Well, that's what it is. I wasn't real sure. And I think there has to be more than 108. So that can't be right. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, 108 is fine.
I need somebody to show me what it is I'm doing, and then I can do it. And Wikipedia does not do that.
No.
I don't think that's right, though, because if we're an average solar system and we have 4 planets, well, one of them's a moon, that could possibly have had life or has life now, because it's Europa and Mars, and there's been some speculation of Venus in the upper atmosphere, and, of course, Earth. So if we're average, and we have one intelligent civilization, why doesn't every other star have one?
You also got to think, other alien life, do they have to have the same type of stuff that we have to have to survive?
Well, see, you guys are jumping ahead. We're going to get into all this later.
I'm sorry.
Jumping ahead. We're just talking about the equation real quick.
I was trying to work this equation.
I have the current best estimates here for what people have. So those sounds like we got about 100. My best estimate is about 1,000. Okay? Just based on some other numbers I found. So
1,000 what? Civilizations in the entire universes?
that are in the galaxy that are currently communicating.
In our galaxy.
In our galaxy, the Milky Way. Okay. So the best estimates currently, there's about 1.5 to 3 stars that are forming every year in the galaxy. That's just what it is on average for our entire galaxy. That's a known number, right? The fraction of those that have planets is now expected that basically every star has a planet. Even if it's a double star system, they probably got some sort of planets there. Now, the number of these that are Earth-like, now this number ranges a decent amount. It's either about 10% or 0.1, somewhere up to 5 planets that are Earth-like on average per star. So I picked about a half. I figured about half of them just because there seems to be quite a few systems where we've got hot Jupiters, stuff like that. And hot Jupiters essentially, that's a Jupiter-sized planet that's close to the star. It'll have chucked out all of the other sort of terrestrial-style planets like Earth.
Sounds like a candy.
The next one, the fraction of planets that could support life that actually develop it at some point. I said this was 1. Basically, I'm thinking that because how quickly after the Earth was able to support life when it's not molten anymore, how quickly that we start getting some life happened, it's probably almost certainly that if you have the stuff for life, it's going to happen. So I picked 1 for that. That's basically what everybody thinks as well. And then the fraction of planets that will actually develop intelligent life. Now, this one is a huge range. And there's a bunch of like fancy math that goes into it to figure it out what it is. Some people say it's as low as like 0.0002 or about 0.2%, all the way up to if they have life, it'll develop intelligence, you know? So I picked 0.1, just 10% of those. I feel like that's a reasonable number. Maybe it's a bit high. And then the fraction of the civilizations that develop technology that will release detectable signs. I said that was 1. I figure if you've got intelligent life, eventually you're going to send something out into space. And then the lifetime is somewhere greater than 300 years is the best estimates. So I said 10,000. Seems reasonable. Maybe it's a little short. But I figure after a certain point, you're just not going to be talking out into space. You're just going to go out there yourself, right? So using those numbers, then you can see there's a huge range that it could be. I get about 1,000. Now,
I'm so confused.
You just take all those numbers I said and multiply them all together.
Okay, yeah, I get that, but I need to see somebody work it out. Like, if you were on a video and you had a whiteboard and you were, like, going step by step, this would make more sense and I could probably make an educated guess of what I think. But that being like it is right now, I'm so confused. I am so lost, and I really hope that people listening are not.
Okay, so I would say for everybody who is listening, Google this equation, look at it while I'm talking through the different numbers, and then you'll see
the Drake equation.
The Drake equation, yes. Okay. So now I figured we could go over some of the things I think are the most reasonable, just based on background and current knowledge, right, in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my favorites.
Okay.
So first of all, before I do that, I heard that Ariel, you were reading the book. I don't think
I'm in the middle of the first section where they're talking about the aliens are here. He has it separated into 3 sections. Like, first section is kind of like not part of the other 3, but it's just going over who Fermi is, what his paradox is, all that jazz. Second section there, which is the first of the answers, is that they are here and they've left evidence that they are. The second one is that they visited us, that jazz. And then the last one is they're not here. So I'm in the first part of the they are here.
Yeah.
I'm trying, man. I gotta be awake and coherent to understand this book. And after I leave work, I'm like, I have no clue what's going on.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get it last night. I forgot I got a new card. So my Amazon was not. I was like, no.
Aww.
No, we're not doing that. So yeah, that was fun, but
it is an interesting book. It is incredibly interesting. You have to be aware of what's going on to understand.
Agreed.
And when you're tired.
Yeah, and when you're tired, it's hard. So, I was trying to get halfway through this book before we talked about it, and I just wasn't able to get there.
I was thinking about trying to do the Audible, but then I was like, I feel like this is one I'm probably going to have to see, so I can take notes.
It probably
and stuff.
would. If I sat down and took notes, I would probably understand more, but I am listening on Audible because I have no time, ever.
Yeah. That's my plan, though, to get it on Kindle.
But it's definitely an interesting book, and if we don't have it in the library, I think we should definitely get it because it is incredibly interesting. Anyways, go on with your talk. Sorry.
Okay. So there's a bunch of different solutions in here. The ones I'm going to go through, like I said, some of the ones I think that are the most likely or I find the most interesting. And then a bonus one that is in a different book that some of us have read. And I think could be a very good solution as well. So, the first one, this is in the They Are Here section. I didn't find much convincing in this section because most of it is kind of nonsense.
Yeah, it's like politicians.
Oh, yeah.
All politicians are aliens. It's like
that was one of them, which is hilarious, but probably not true.
All Hungarians, they're aliens. I mean, they're very crackpot kind of ideas. I 1000% believe in aliens, and even those ones I'm like, probably not.
Yeah.
You need to do some UFO research. There's none of that stuff in UFO research. There's actual real evidence.
Yeah. He mentions in there that even the politician thing, he's like, this is crackpot theories, but I am including them.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's a pretty cool thing to do, though. I mean,
to cover all bases.
It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it kind of does. I mean,
nowadays.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so the first one's the interdict scenario. This is basically, there are reasons why other civilizations, we expect that there are civilizations, out there, and they have all their different empires and stuff, but there is some value that they put on life-supporting planets that develop intelligence, okay? And as such, those systems are universally agreed to be off-limits, right? It's similar to, the Star Trek type of world or universe, right? Where you've got
the Prime Directive.
Basically, the Prime Directive. You don't interfere with another civilization's development, and you make sure that nobody else does that too, right? But you'd have to have some sort of way of governing that. And this is one that appears in sci-fi all the time. I think it's a little bit unrealistic because I feel like if there were civilizations, I don't think that they would be adhering to this law or whatever universally. It seems like it would be a very difficult thing to A, enforce, and B, be agreed upon by all the different races, right? So this is one that I like just because it's good in sci-fi and stuff, but it's I don't think very realistic. I guess the second one here, because I've got about, like I said, 8 to get through. So I'm going to go through these sort of fast, but feel free to hop in if any of you guys think that something's particularly interesting or you disagree with. The next one is it's posited as sort of a reason for civilizations not being seen, but I think that I agree with the author here. I think that it's actually something that would be the opposite. And this is the use of Bracewell von Neumann probes. And a von Neumann probe is basically a self-replicating spaceship. They can go to different solar systems, eat all their stuff there, out in the asteroid field, make more of itself, and then go on to different solar systems. So, basically,
that sounds kind of scary because it reminds me of the replicators in Stargate.
It is like the replicators in Stargate, yeah.
What do you mean eat all their stuff?
You go out to the asteroid belt and you mine metals and things to make new copies of the robots. And once it makes a bunch of copies of itself, the copies go off to a different solar system, and then they can be remade there, do the same thing over and over and over again. And if this happened, right, if you could do this, you would have expected that by this time, these von Neumann probes would have already gotten through the whole galaxy.
I'm going to say that eat was not a good word to use there.
Well, they're like little robots that eat stuff and poop out new robots. There's a really good book series about something like this. It's called The Bobiverse. So I would say take a look at that one. The issue I have with this one, and the issue the author has with this one, is that it sounds like if this was true, it would have almost very much televised or really advertised that another race was here because we probably would have seen evidence of this at some point, right? It's been millions and millions of years since these things probably would have been sent out. They've populated the whole galaxy by now because even if you're traveling at like slow-ish speeds, when you've got millions of years, you can get to everywhere pretty quickly.
Yeah, but what if they're not as advanced as all that? Like maybe they're just like us.
Well, so the idea is if you can make a fully self-replicating robot, then interstellar travel using said robots is probably not that hard.
Well, maybe, but maybe they didn't feel like searching the galaxy until just recently.
Well, so it depends on what you mean by recently. So,
like the last 1,000 years.
Well, okay, if it was just the last 1,000 years, that'd be a huge coincidence that they would be waiting that long. You gotta remember, these civilizations have probably been around for billions of years longer than us, or at least millions of years longer than us, because our sun is fairly young. It's about, 4-point-something billion years old? And then our galaxy, or the universe at least, is 13.6. So there's a huge gap in there where other civilizations could have been doing stuff. And that's the issue. So whenever there's probably a bunch of these civilizations would have developed prior to us, and if they had any sort of technological development like ours, then they should have populated the galaxy already. So there's got to be some reason why they haven't.
They don't like us. They don't want to catch the humans.
Honestly, I kind of agree with that. They'd probably look at us and like, nope, we'll come back later.
I mean, that would be nice. It's better than some of the other alternatives.
Yeah.
The next one, speaking of some of the alternatives, there's one called the Berserkers.
That doesn't sound good.
No, it's not great. So,
can I preface this by saying I'm petrified of aliens, so I'm not enjoying this conversation at all.
I love it.
So there is this idea of something like the von Neumann machines that we were just talking about, but let's pretend that they were mean, and instead of just taking some stuff out of your asteroid belt and comets and things, instead they would seek out life-bearing planets and destroy them, right? Because you don't want competition in the galaxy. You got one race, and they said, you know what? If any of these other races become more advanced than us, they could take us out. So let's take all of them out first. And they would send maybe these berserkers to planets that are actually like, emitting stuff, or just any planets they find that have life on them.
That's terrifying.
The clear issue with this one is that A, they could have already went to all the different planetary systems by now in the whole galaxy. But also, we exist, so it's probably not this. But it does sort of
or we're not a threat.
Yeah.
It is an interesting one to consider, right? And it sort of couples with this next one, which is that they just have no desire to communicate. And the reason I say it couples with that is because I'm going to briefly talk about one that's not in this book, but I think is probably one of the better solutions for the Fermi Paradox, at least in my mind. Now, there's a book series called The Three-Body Problem, right? I don't actually know what that's the book series name, but the first book is The Three-Body Problem. The second book is called The Dark Forest. And I'm going to give you some spoilers for The Dark Forest, so if you don't want to hear them, skip ahead about, 2 or 3 minutes. But basically, the idea of the Dark Forest is that you have all the different civilizations in the galaxy, and they are two things. They're both silent and paranoid. The reason they are silent, though, is because of their paranoia. Basically, if you think any other intelligent species could be a threat to you, right? Because you don't know their intentions, you don't know how advanced they are, etc., then you would destroy any other intelligent life that you come across, or any other life that you come across. So basically, if you emit out any sort of signal out into space and some other civilization detects it, that civilization will immediately destroy the one that tried to contact them, because they don't want you to get more advanced than them and take them out later, right?
And here we are, sending out signals all the time.
Well, the signals that we send out are probably not powerful enough, but they could be. You never know. But the issue is, if everybody sort of thinks like this, or even if not everybody thinks like this, but some civilizations think like this, and those civilizations are more advanced than us, right? Any civilization that does say, hey, we want to communicate, is immediately destroyed by the other ones, right? So every civilization that is left is silent and won't say anything for fear of being destroyed.
I don't like this.
No, it's terrifying, right?
I'm not in control of who's sending out signals, so we're going to get killed, and I just don't like this.
No, it's not a great one, but that is the premise of that book, and it's a good book.
Note to self, never read it.
It is absolutely terrifying, though. It is absolutely terrifying. Just this idea.
And like in the book, it's like there would be somebody that would be like, okay, I'm going to respond.
Yep. No! See, I'm going to have nightmares tonight. I'm going to think about this.
It was scary.
And I'm just going to die.
Probably not.
I think you'll probably be fine for now. I mean, if it does turn out that this is true, they'll probably take us out real quick and we won't notice. I think in the book, they blew up suns. Like the whole sun.
Well, that would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is that they took themselves out. Everybody at some point will take themselves out. And I think that this one's fine as a solution. But I think like, nuclear war and all that stuff, it's not enough to really take people out. Overpopulation, maybe. But eventually you'd have some people come back. And maybe you won't make that mistake again. I don't know. It seems unlikely that every single civilization would have gotten taken out, except by this one thing that I think is kind of scary. And it's called the gray goo problem. Has anybody heard of this?
No.
Okay, so the gray goo problem. You know how you have this idea of nanobots, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's imagine for a second that they could make more of themselves by, the same processes in which they were made. They take molecules and things, tear them apart, put them back together again into new nanobots. Well, let's pretend that works. And they didn't have some nice fail-safe so they don't eat. And in this I would say sort of eat any sort of organic matter, right? Carbon-based life forms, for example, or carbon-based anything. And the idea is that if these things sort of got on a runaway streak, right, they would start grabbing everything that has carbon. And I don't know if you guys know this, but we're all made of carbon. So that means we would be food.
I don't like this.
If this is true, if this could happen, right, then you could have a civilization go from fine to completely taken out in some place about the size of the Earth in about 3 hours, at least less than a day, because every single one would make more of itself, and as those grew, it'd be an exponential curve that just runs away.
But we need EMPs.
Well, I mean, we better set them off real quick, because otherwise...
Yeah.
I hate this so much. Oh my God. Y'all have no idea. I'm having mental torture right now.
You picked this specifically to torture her, didn't you?
I did. It was my thought going in. It was great.
Oh my God, I hate this. I don't even know that I want to finish this book now. I'm so freaked out by all these different possibilities. I hate this. This is why we don't, I have a strict rule. We don't talk about aliens after dark. I'm thinking that there should just be a strict rule. We don't talk about aliens.
Yep.
Okay, so
I love it. Keep going.
There's a couple more that I would like to go over. This next one, first of all, I think the gray goo problem, I just want to preface this. I think that one's terrifying. I don't think it's actually realistic because if we get to that level of technology, presumably we'll have good enough fail-safes. But, if it did happen, there's some rogue entity that didn't allow us to do that, then, well, we'd be boned. Okay, so I want to go over a couple ones that have also been updated since this book was written. I think a lot of the ones in the They Do Not Exist section are just patently incorrect now because this book was written, I think, 20 years ago. And we've made huge strides in astronomy since then. One of them is that planetary systems are rare. We know that this is not true. We found thousands of them at this point through various different methods, transit method, radial velocity, wobbling, etc., direct imaging of planets. In fact, if you look up the star, PDS 70, I predicted that there was a planet there, and they took a picture of it later, so you're welcome, world. Anyway, so this one is just not true anymore, or at least we know that it's not true, so a lot of these are kind of a big deal that in the They Do Not Exist category, that they're just not. Another one is that rocky planets are rare. We see tons of those. And then the next one, okay, this one might be realistic, is that the galaxy itself is very dangerous. Lots of stuff can happen. And also this couples with the next one, which is that planetary systems or solar systems are dangerous. And what basically that means is that there's a bunch of stuff that could happen in the galaxy that could just straight up wipe us out, right? Entirely within a second. It's ridiculous. If there was a nearby supernova, we're dead. If there's a gamma ray burst pointed at us, we're dead. the whole entire planet would just be instantly scorched of all life, right? If one of these things was pointed at us. And those can be like very far away. If we got hit by a big enough asteroid, we're dead. And there was a lot of early collisions, and there's still a lot of collisions that could happen. And if you get caught in this thing between, oh, now we're intelligent, and we can't actually get rid of the asteroids, then a civilization would be doomed. There's this idea of ice ages. If the climate is not stable, well, then the entire planet could freeze over in 2.5 miles of ice. And this is something that's happened previously on this planet. Basically, you can have almost no life. They talk about super volcanoes, max extinctions, etc., etc., etc. So basically, the solar system and planetary systems and the galaxy are just really, really dangerous. And any of these things could randomly happen. But again, there's like so many different planets, you think eventually one of them will get lucky.
Yeah, I think I agree the most with that one. I mean, why wouldn't it be dangerous? I don't know. That one's the easiest to agree with. Yeah.
It seems reasonable.
Yeah.
There's a documented like 12,000 year cycle where there's like catastrophes on Earth that they can go back.
Well, a bit overdue if that's the case. So I think the last one was probably the Ice Age.
That's the issue.
And apparently the most recent Ice Age was like pathetic.
The Younger Dryas, I think, was the last.
I believe you're right. So then there's a bunch of arguments about, like, you know, the Earth is unique. It's got a moon. It's got these nice plate tectonics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And life could only formed under these sorts of conditions. I think that's nonsense. I think that, what was it? What's his name? Who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide? Douglas Adams? Yeah, Douglas Adams.
Uh-huh.
I came up with a very good analogy of this. And that is that if you have a puddle, right, it's in its little hole, it says, wow, this puddle or this hole was perfectly made to hold me. I fill up every corner. It's just perfect, right? And that's just patently nonsense. The hole was there. The puddle filled it up. It's not the other way around, right? It's not because the hole was made for the puddle. It's that the puddle was made for the hole, right? So it's not that our planet was made for life. It's that life developed on this planet. So obviously it's going to have all the same criteria that would be good for developing life on this planet. If you have a different planet with different sorts of things, then it could have life develop in a entirely different way, right? So
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. That by itself is a nonsense argument. So yeah. The thing that the author comes up with as the actual reason, and I think it's not a unique reasoning. It's something that I also thought too while I was reading this book, and then you get to the final bit. And that is something he talks about using what is called the sieve of Aristophanes. I think that's what it is. Ooh. You never know with these old Greek names. Let me see what it says here. Sieve of... Yeah, Aristophanes. I was right. So basically, it's a way of finding primes. You go through all the numbers and you can cross off different things based on how they are multiples of each other, right? For example, you write down a grid of all the numbers 1 through 100, and you say, what's the first prime? It's not 1. We skip that one. It's 2, right? So you take 2, and then you cross out all the numbers that are multiples of 2, right? So 4, 6, 8, 10, blah, blah, blah. Then you go to 3. You cross out all the numbers that are multiples of 3. You go up through this, and all the stuff that are left when you get to 100, that is all the primes. So he takes a similar sort of approach here and basically says it's difficult to come up with life in the first place, especially when you have all of these different difficult steps that you have to get through to get to life that can actually communicate. So basically, he's taking a bunch of the different solutions and putting them all together, which is probably a lot more realistic. If there's no life in this, no one solution is going to be able to explain everything. So you are going to have a combination of a bunch of these different ones. So he talks about being in the galactic habitable zone. The next one is you got to have the right kind of star. So no O and B or K and M stars. These are stars that are smaller and larger than ours. The larger ones, they die too quickly. You can't have life when the star only lasts a few million years. And the other ones, they don't put out enough energy. And actually, the K and M stars have this issue where even if you're in the habitable zone, you get bombarded with X-rays all the time in the early chunk of a K and M star's life. So you're not going to have that. And it goes throughout that. You have to be in the habitable zone. You have to be around a sun-like star. You have to be not taken out by the rest of the universe, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he comes down to this idea that there's probably no life in our galaxy at all. aside from us. We're the only ones. And there's probably life elsewhere, but it's not in our galaxy.
I just don't agree with that at all, but go ahead.
I was going to say I don't really agree with it either. I think it's unconvincing because I feel like, well, okay, so I'm going to preface this. This is explicitly civilizations that can communicate. I think that the possibility of there being, life in the galaxy is 100%. There's definitely other life in the galaxy. The question is whether or not it can communicate with us or does communicate with us, right? And I think that one's a little bit more tricky, right? I would expect there to be other intelligent life in the galaxy, but maybe not right now, or maybe they just don't want to talk or can't talk to us. Maybe space travel's too hard or something like that, And that's the question.
I mean, it's like how many stars are in our galaxy?
Something like 400 billion.
So we're one in a
maybe a
400
trillion.
billion
Actually, I've seen estimates up to a trillion. There's a ton.
It's like, so intelligent life under those circumstances, 1 in a trillion. That just seems like
I don't
crazy.
know. I just, for me, I really think, obviously we've had reports of UFOs and aliens really being a thing and whatever, all the stuff declassified recently. So I get it. But on the same, I just don't know how we can be the only planet that has life forms like us, or that, are intelligent enough to think about expanding outward. That seems way too
unbelievable.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. It's one of those things we kind of talked about, how we think that like trees and plants don't have thoughts and feelings and all that stuff. I think, again, it's just kind of some sort of arrogance. Not necessarily that everybody, that we're all bad or whatever, but it's just, why would we be the only ones? I don't know.
Yeah, I fully believe in aliens. I fully believe that there have been, sightings of actual alien spacecrafts here, So I think maybe that there are other things in our galaxy that are coming to visit and see what we are, and I would get observing and not communicating too, because you don't know how we're going to react. And if they can see anything of like what we do with just humans who are different, I could see where they'd be like, no, I'm good. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, the whole idea of it's absolutely terrifying to me. So I try not to think about it too much.
That's fair. Yeah, I personally don't think that any of the UFO sightings or anything are legit, personally. I get that there's all these videos and evidence, blah, 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 blah. I just don't believe it.
I saw one.
Well, I just don't believe it. Could have been something else, Mama.
I don't care with you. It may have been, but it's like it was not like anything else we'd ever seen.
That's fair.
And it was, I saw it, Ange saw it, Mom saw it, other people in the community saw it. It was back in the 70s. So there was something there.
That's fair. There's all kinds of this cool atmospheric phenomena or space phenomena, blah, 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 blah.
This was literally within, 500 yards. It was pretty close.
Well, I don't know then. Could have been something. Could have been crazy. Who knows? I still don't think it's aliens. I think that there are other explanations. I don't think it's aliens.
Have you heard the name Valiant Thor?
Yes, I've heard of Valiant Thor.
He was actually in the White House for, a couple of years?
That's what people say, yes.
There was documentation of
there's documentation that there is a guy named Valiant Thor, or called himself Valiant Thor, who was there. Because people are stupid. We used to think that we could program people to be sleeper agents and all this junk. You've heard of MK Ultra, right? That's a real thing that happened, right? It was just all a bunch of nonsense. Like, they didn't do anything with that.
They killed people.
They did. Okay, yeah. They did kill people, but I'm saying they didn't do anything legit. They didn't give people superpowers, is what they were trying to do.
Not superpowers, but they did do some serious experimentation and people died.
Oh, yeah. No, it was terrible. It's an awful thing. The fact that we thought that we could do stuff like this, though, and killed people to try to do it is nonsense. So basically, MK Ultra is the same sort of thing that created, if anybody has seen Stranger Things, it's that sort of thing. They messed around with people and tried to make them into, to give them superpowers like astral projection and telekinesis, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, it's obviously nonsense, especially nowadays. And
see, I don't think it's obviously nonsense. I think that was just not a very well conducted experiment.
I claim it's obviously nonsense. Anyway. So
okay, what about the different types of civilizations? You got your type 1, your type 2, that type.
Oh, the K1, K2, and K3. Okay, so we're sort of not. Okay, just to briefly explain this. K1 is a civilization that can take control of all the energy on a planet. K2 is one that can take control of all the energy of a star. And K3 is one that can take control of all the energy of a galaxy. And I guess, I don't think there is a K4, but you can see the pattern here.
Yeah. We're not even real.
Yeah, we're not even a K1.
No.
But didn't they find some evidence of possibility having a K2 out there somewhere?
Yeah, so, what's her name? Tammy Star? Is that what you're talking about?
I can't remember.
Sounds like a drag queen.
It does. I love it.
So this is something, it starts with a T. Just an editor's note here. It's Tabby's Star. That was close. Yeah.
Yep.
That happened when I was in grad school. And basically there was some discussion about whether or not these strange dips in solar output that were like irregular meant that there was some sort of Dyson swarm. And a Dyson swarm is basically just a megastructure where you put a bunch of like large panels into space to harvest energy from a star. And you would be able to see this from other stars because they would be occulting or covering up the light from the star. Turns out it's dust in this case, but that is something that we're looking for. And that's something that could feasibly be a good signal that a civilization is there. I would say, though, that if a civilization is getting up to K2 status, not quite there, but getting up in that direction, we are so boned.
Well, not only if they think the way we do and they want to.
But you have to assume that they don't, and you have to assume that all civilizations that are like this also don't.
Are like us.
No, that are not like us.
Yeah, not like us.
I know. So maybe they
would.
wouldn't. Maybe conquest is not their thing.
Well, okay, maybe that's true for a single civilization, but if there are thousands, one of them at least would be.
You've got Klingons and Romulans out there, I'm
exactly.
sure.
Honestly, I feel like we're one of those that would definitely try.
I think
and that's
yeah.
like, I think that's why we put so much bad juju on aliens coming from elsewhere, because we think that everybody's going to be worse than, or at least as bad as us.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's also kind of silly, but
I think my opinion on this whole matter is that there's definitely alien life out there. I hope it's not intelligent, personally. I really hope it's not intelligent, because if it is, it's probably more advanced than us, and if they find out and they're anything like us, we're done for, period.
Yeah.
Have you heard the theory that octopuses are alien?
I have heard that.
Because they're so intelligent? I could see it.
And they're very different from most
I
other
like
life.
them. I like octopus a lot, but after hearing that kind of freaked me out.
Oh, I think they're incredibly intelligent. And what do? We eat them.
Yeah.
Let's get a couple.
We're awful.
They are very smart. They're very cool creatures. And I have heard that thing before, that they were maybe seeded from elsewhere as well. It just depends.
Or the fact that the RH negative people are aliens. I've heard that too.
Yeah, I heard that from Ancient Aliens.
Okay, if you hear anything on Ancient Aliens, it's nonsense.
No,
Your daddy was.
Yeah, and my daughter is.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, so we're coming up on very long for this podcast.
Yeah.
So are there any closing thoughts? Because I think I've gotten everything I wanted to out of this book. It's a fantastic book. I think everybody should read it if you're at all interested in aliens or space or whatever. It's a cool read. It's a little out of date, so if you're up with the current planetary search stuff, a lot of the stuff in they don't exist section is kind of bunk nowadays, but it's still a very interesting read.
I think there are aliens already here. I think too many people see too many things and have too many experiences. Now, where they're from, I have no idea,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's another dimension or whether it's from another planet. But I think that, I guess, hardcore scientists or people that are afraid of losing tenure or whatever to study this just blow it off as bunk because they're afraid for their careers. I think if we actually studied it like a scientist should study things, there would be more evidence.
I agree with that.
I think so too.
I disagree.
You would.
Well, it's because you're a hardcore scientist. It's like, oh, this is crazy stuff. This is what you've been indoctrinated to believe. But I think as a scientist, you should have an open mind and you should study the stuff without making a decision before you even have a theory.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think a lot of
something's going on.
Older scientists, especially, don't want to change their belief. Like, I watched something where archaeologists didn't want to agree that people had been around a lot longer in that area than what they actually had,
Mm-hmm.
even though there was proof. They just didn't want to agree with that. They just were like, no, that can't be possible.
There is definitely some evidence for that. I can't remember who said it, but basically it says that scientific progress is made as scientists die, or when scientists die, you know?
One funeral at a time.
Yeah, one funeral
Science
at a time,
advances.
exactly.
Science advances one funeral at a time.
There's definitely some credence to that.
But I really think we should look at the phenomenon of what's going on here and out in space much more openly, instead of like deciding this is how it's done and then looking for the proof for that. We should look at the evidence and then...
I feel like the issue is a lot of the times people do not want, or at least scientists do not want to jump to more, I would say, outlandish or improbable solutions than the basic ones first. And sure, maybe we could study these a bit more in the future, but it's still the first assumption should not be aliens. It should be something else.
No, but it shouldn't be like not aliens either.
Oh, I think it should be at first not aliens, and then when you've ruled out everything, then you can say aliens. You have to rule out everything else first, because it's a lot more likely that it's not aliens than it is aliens.
But they don't look at it at all. They just say, oh, there's no way that can happen. So, I don't know. I just think it needs to be looked at more openly and more, I guess, scientifically, instead of dismissed outright.
Okay, well, we can just agree to disagree on that one. I like talking about it, but I still don't buy it.
Yeah, I know. And I'm the all-in type person.
Yep.
To an extent. Because I think it's all fascinating.
Oh, it is all fascinating. I listen to conspiracy theory stuff all the time.
Yeah. It's like, what is more scary? If we're alone in the universe, or there's thousands and thousands of other species?
The thousands and thousands of other species is way more terrifying to me.
I
think the alone is.
I kind of think both are scary. Really.
Well, they are.
Yeah.
But it's like if we're alone and we travel along the paths we seem to travel on and kill ourselves.
Yeah. We're it.
But that's sad.
See, that seems more sad than scary. I just want to believe it's like Doctor Who. And there's a doctor out there. And he's going to help us. Because he likes Earth a lot.
If you could come, Doctor, we're here.
Yes.
Please. All right. I think we are going to sign off here. Before we go, I wanted to let you guys know we now have a Facebook group and a Goodreads page for Reading Room Ruffians. You should be able to search Reading Room Ruffians on both of those places to find us. We also have our TikTok we mentioned earlier, and our Instagram. Both are at the handle at WVJCO Library. And you can give us a follow on those. We are coming with new content all the time.
Like and subscribe.
Absolutely. And I think we also mentioned this before. If you guys send us proof of you subscribing and listening to us, and we will put you in for a drawing. We'll send you some goodies.
And a little Reading Room Ruffian shout out. Thank you, Ange, for leaving a comment on our podcast on, I believe it was Audible.
I think so, yeah, it was.
So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely, we appreciate you. All right, thanks for listening to another episode of Reading Room Ruffians. And remember, only the best libraries have librarians who don't shush you.